3 weeks before Christmas, my mother called me. Her voice sounded careful, the way people sound when they're about to say something cruel and pretend it isn't. She said, "Sweetheart, we think it's best if you don't come this year." No explanation, just silence. Then she added one more thing that made my chest go cold. "It's just better for the family." I sat there holding the phone, staring at the window. Snow had started falling outside, the slow kind that makes the whole world look quiet. "So that's it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Well, Laura's kids will be here. It might be a little chaotic, and we just think it would be easier." Easier. I'd heard that word before. Easier meant someone else had decided I didn't belong. So I said something simple. "Of course," and then I hung up. What they didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier I had signed papers for something I never imagined I'd own. A 40-acre estate outside the city. Old stone house, long driveway, oak trees older than my grandfather, and a ballroom. The kind of place people imagine when they think about old European mansions. I hadn't told my family, because my family had never been particularly interested in anything I did. Not really. You see, in our family, there had always been a hierarchy. At the top was my sister, Laura, golden child, perfect daughter, perfect mother, perfect wife. Or at least, that's the story everyone liked to repeat. Laura had 2 loud kids and a husband who changed careers every year. Somehow, none of that ever counted against her. Under Laura came everyone else. My parents, my uncle, my cousins, and somewhere near the bottom was me, the quiet one, the one who left early, the one who never really understood family. At every Christmas dinner, someone would bring up my work. My uncle would lean back in his chair and ask with a smile that always felt slightly crooked, "So how's that little computer project going?" My father would laugh. My sister would say something like, "You've been doing that for years. Does it even make money?" And I'd shrug, because explaining things to people who have already decided you're insignificant is a waste of oxygen. The truth was that my little computer project had been a software company, a boring one, if you looked at it from the outside, but the kind of boring that solves expensive problems. For 10 years, I worked alone. Long nights, take-out containers, servers crashing at 2 in the morning, and 3 months ago, a larger company bought it. $38 million. After taxes and partners and everything else, I walked away with more money than anyone in my family had ever imagined. But I didn't tell them, partly because I didn't feel like explaining it, and partly because watching people reveal who they are when they think you have nothing is educational. Which brings us back to that phone call. After my mother told me not to come for Christmas, I sat there for a while. I tried to decide if I felt angry, or hurt, or relieved, but mostly I felt something strange. Space. Because exclusion does something interesting. It removes expectations, and I suddenly had an entire Christmas with no obligations. A few days earlier, when I first visited the estate, the realtor had walked me through the property. The house was massive but quiet. Old wooden floors, tall windows, a staircase that curved like something out of a movie. At the back of the property was a garden with long stone paths and lantern posts. This place was used for diplomatic receptions, the realtor had told me. Big parties. Then she opened double doors that led into the ballroom. High ceilings, crystal chandeliers, enough space for 200 people. She laughed and said, you could host a wedding in here." At the time, I had smiled politely. But now, sitting in my apartment after my mother's phone call, that sentence came back to me. "You could host a wedding in here," or a Christmas. The idea formed slowly, like a puzzle piece sliding into place. If my family didn't want me at their Christmas, fine, I would have my own. But not a lonely dinner, not a quiet evening, a real Christmas. The kind people remember. The invitations went out a week later. I didn't invite celebrities or executives or investors. I invited people who had been kind to me when kindness mattered. My old high school teacher who used to stay late helping students, the couple who owned the small bookstore downtown, former coworkers, neighbors, single parents, friends I hadn't seen in years, people who knew how to show up. 200 invitations, one simple message. Christmas at the estate, no gifts required, just come hungry. Once the invitations were sent, things moved quickly. I hired a chef who specialized in winter banquets, roasted vegetables, prime rib, fresh bread, mulled wine. A local jazz quartet agreed to play near the garden fire pits, and a lighting company strung warm white lights across the oak trees and pathways. When the decorations were finished, the estate looked unreal, lanterns glowing along the driveway, soft music drifting through the halls, snow gathering gently across the lawn. For the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like possibility. Of course, news travels fast in small towns. 3 days before Christmas, my father called. His voice sounded cautious. "We heard you're hosting some kind of event." "Yes." "How big?" "About 200 people." Silence. Then he cleared his throat. "You should have told us. We could have come." I almost laughed. 3 weeks earlier, I had asked to attend their Christmas, and they told me it would be better if I didn't. So I simply said, "Maybe next year." The night of the party arrived with fresh snow. Cars began lining the long driveway before sunset. People stepped out, laughing, carrying coats and scarves. Inside the house, the ballroom filled with warm light and music. Children ran across the lawn. Adults gathered near the fire pits with cups of hot cider. Some guests walked slowly through the house, amazed by the rooms and windows and old stone fireplaces. One of the chefs pulled me aside at one point and said, "You realize half the town is talking about this party?" I asked why. He smiled. "Because they just figured out who owns the estate." And that's when headlights appeared at the end of the driveway. 3 cars. They rolled slowly up the path and stopped near the entrance. I already knew who it was before the doors opened. My parents, my sister, my uncle. They stepped out and stood there looking around. My sister whispered something to my mother. Then she turned to me. "This is your house?" I nodded. My father looked at the lights strung across the trees, the music drifting from the garden, the crowd of people laughing and talking. Then he said quietly, "You should have told us." For a moment I considered explaining everything, the company, the sale, the estate, all the years of work, but none of that really mattered. So instead I said something simpler. I tried to come to Christmas in no anger, no lecture, just the truth. And for the first time in my life, my family had no response. Later that night, after most of the guests had gone home and the snow had covered the garden paths again, I walked the elderly bookstore couple to the door. The woman hugged me and smiled. "You know what the secret to family is?" I asked what. She said, "It isn't blood. It's invitation." After they left, I stood on the porch and looked across the quiet estate. The lights glowed softly against the snow. And I realized something strange. My family hadn't excluded me from Christmas. They had excluded themselves from the life I built. And the strangest part? They still probably think the worst thing I did that night was not saving them a seat, because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes you just build a bigger table and let everyone see who isn't sitting at it.